Hi, Miguel, it's Lisa.
Hello.
Hello.
I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
I am not muted.
Oh, can you try again, speak?
Hello.
Hello. Okay, now I can hear you. I got Moteki already in.
Yeah, Miguel's also in.
Miguel. Oh. Hello. Hi, Moteki. How are you?
I'm fine, yourself, Clara. I'm good. Thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Boa tarde, Miguel.
Como estás?
Estou bem, você?
Também.
Vamos obrigado.
Não é obrigado, não é obrigado, Miguel.
At least, Clara, I can try, you see?
Well done. I think it's always very important.
Everyone. Good luck, everyone.
Good luck.
Oh, Clara, your presentation.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us again today on Thursdays for our deep learning sessions. Today, it's going to be a bit of a different format from the ones that we've had before, because we really have a focus on one specific TFCAs in Southern Africa, one of the SADC 18, and this is the Lubombo TFCA, which is a marine TFCA, not just a terrestrial TFCA. So we're going to focus today, since we've been talking about complexity, we've been talking about sustainability management, on how do we look at creating sustainable fisheries in SADC TFCA, considering that we have multiple uses for our coastal areas. And chairing this session today is Moseki Statuayo from SADC TFCA Secretariat. He is a technical advisor for fisheries. Before I give you the word, Moseki, I just would like to remind everybody to use the chat box to put your name, institution, and country possibly where you are joining us from, and use your chat box to ask questions, to engage with the presenters and the participants, and to just create a dialogue and more learning and knowledge around different experiences on managing sustainable fisheries in Southern Africa and in other regions of the world. Moteki, the word is yours and the floor is too. So good luck for the session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clara. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes,
as it has already been said, my name is Moseki Statuayo. I'm the technical advisor responsible for fisheries and aquaculture at the SADC Secretariat. I'm a zoologist by training, and fisheries came to me after studying aquaculture at University of Limpopo in South Africa. And I became interested as I was in policy development. And we've done a lot of work in the region to ensure sustainable fisheries and aquaculture development in all the 16 countries of our region. Fisheries, as Clara has said, is one of the sectors that plays an important and a key role in the sustainable implementation of our TFCA program. And it was a befitting call for us to be part of this webinar series in celebration of 20 years of the TFCA program in our region. And this happens during the year when SADC as a regional bloc celebrate 40 years of cooperation. And I must tell you, coming from the Secretariat itself, that the TFCA program is one such unique program that has proven and demonstrated how regional integration can work for the betterment of our economies and the people of our region in creating sustainable livelihoods and development. Now, fisheries and aquaculture are of critical importance for the economy of the SADC region, more important for food security. And this is well captured in three or four of our key policy instruments in the region. The SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, the SADC Industrialization Strategy and Roadmap, as well as the Regional Agricultural Policy. Now, one of my responsibilities at the Secretariat is to ensure that we develop a regional fisheries and aquaculture program that is guided by the SADC Protocol on Fisheries, which has entered into force in 2003. And it has an objective of promoting responsible and sustainable use of living aquatic resources, as well as aquatic ecosystems of interest to the state parties. Specifically, the protocol requires us to promote and enhance food security and human health, safeguard the livelihood of fishing communities, generate economic communities for nationals in the region, ensure that the future generations benefit from these renewable resources, and most importantly, to alleviate poverty with the ultimate objective of eradicating it. Now, most SADC member states have domesticated these instruments and are implementing it through their various national frameworks and programs, Mozambique being one of them. Mozambique, because today's talk, as much as it talks about an area that cuts across 3 countries, the specific discussions we are going to have are more specific to the coast in Mozambique. Now, despite all this, the region continues to experience several problems, and some of them include overfishing, well documented, degradation of aquatic environments, as well as pollution. One of the key areas that we are working on as the Secretariat is combating illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. To say a bit of this, SADC is establishing a center to coordinate regional efforts to fight IUU fishing in Mozambique. And this is very important to note because the work that is happening in Mozambique, be it within the Transfrontier Park or outside, will also be impacted upon by this initiative. Other challenges, as we know, that affect fisheries and aquaculture include climate change, lack of capacity to effectively manage our fish stocks, poor investments both in aquaculture and fisheries, and of course, everybody has been talking about unsustainable aquaculture practices. But we are also trying to put in place mechanisms to address some of these challenges. Now, marine protected areas or marine reserves as well are increasingly being used in fisheries management and conservation as a tool to enhance fish biomass, improve fish catch, and also for adjacent fisheries that are outside those areas. They have capabilities to protect fish populations from declining and restore and preserve our natural ecosystems. All this is in an effort to achieve both our conservation and fisheries outcomes. And this is well in alignment with the work that we are doing in implementing the protocol on fisheries. One of the key outcomes that is sometimes neglected is a food security and a livelihood outcome. And I'm sure in today's deep learning, we'll be looking at some of the successes, challenges, and lessons learned in implementing an ecosystem approach to fisheries management in Ponta do Ouro Partial Marine Reserve, which is part of the Lubombo Transfrontier Conservation Area. Now, to talk to us today is Mr. Miguel Gonzalez, who is a park warden at Ponta do Ouro Partial Marine Reserve, as well as Maputo Special Reserve. Miguel was born and educated in Mozambique. He studied marine biology at Eduardo Mondlane University, and he has worked extensively in Mozambique, running programs like the Marine Coral Reef Monitoring Program. He's worked in the private sector in the prawn fishery, and he's also done work together with WWF in the first Mozambique trials on turtle excluded devices. Miguel has worked in this area as a park warden since 2008, and in the marine, in the Mozambique, is it Maputo or Maputo Special Reserve since 2017. I would like to share a video first to introduce Miguel and his work.
You go onto the beach, generally it's a calmish evening, winds may be rising. You're sitting there, all is quiet. Then this shadow comes out of the water slowly, and it walks up the beach, plodding. And you just sit back and you're absolutely awestruck. Maybe they've been doing it for 60 million years, unchanged.
See a turtle coming out, you can't explain. It's something that you don't forget, ever. You have to experience.
What it's going to do. It decides where it's going to build its nest. It carefully crafts a hole and then has a rest. And then it lays its eggs. It's beyond comprehension how this can actually happen. And to actually see this happening in the wild, naturally, is an amazing experience.
Only in 30 years' time, we're gonna have these etchings that we're trying to protect now to come back and nest on this same area.
It's going to take 30 years for your initial protection to result in increased numbers. People say 1 to 2% of the turtles that actually hatch and go into the ocean grow to maturity.
Out of 1,000 hatchlings, just one gets into the mature stage.
We have thousands of hatchlings successfully entering. But then as they enter the water, it's crystal clear, there's very little cover. There's predators, there's kingfishers, there's sharks, there's all sorts of things, there's birds, there's crabs. Most of them will be killed, but some do survive. And the good news is that in South Africa and southern Mozambique at the moment, we're actually making good progress towards protecting these animals. Numbers are increasing. It's a huge responsibility we've got to ensure that our children and our children's children can see this happening.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Over to Mr. Miguel Gonzalez.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Miguel.
Okay, thanks. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'll start with a invite that called me a fisheries expert. It feels good to read it, but in fact, I'm not an expert in fisheries. It's probably why recently I had instructions to spend more time on a terrestrial reserve than on a marine reserve. It's good to see that Raquel Fernandes is in the group. She's from Centro Terra Viva. There's a logo there. Actually, they've been our experts on fisheries. We have a MOU with Centro Terra Viva, and they've been helping us a lot on managing our fish. So I'll try my best, but having in mind that I'm not an expert. So not in Zoom also. I hope this works. All right, the background, the Ponta do Ouro Partial Marine Reserve was established in 2009. And from that year, we became part of the first and so far the only marine TFCA in Africa and our continent. So the map doesn't really show all, but it comes all the way from St. Lucia in South Africa to the Maputo River mouth on the Maputo Bay side. The management plan, when we did the management plan, we defined 3 different areas in the marine reserve. Multi-use area that was basically due to the development that we found when the reserve was created, and also to make sure that our artisanal and subsistence fishermen had access to the resources. We have also one restrict area and the sanctuary, being the sanctuary a no-go zone. The Act brings clearly that no semi-industrial fishing is allowed within our boundaries, and management plan brought a lot of new rules into it, but mainly no bottom fishing is allowed, and also no sharks are allowed to be caught on the Ponta do Ouro Partial Marine Reserve. So the institutional arrangements to manage the MPA are a bit, I don't know if it's the right word, it's complicated, it is more or less that. So we, as a protected area, we are under a NAC, a National Administration for Conservation Area, within the Ministry of Land and Environment. We have the authority to manage protected areas in Mozambique. But on the seaside of things, we have also what we call MIMAIP, that is the Ministry of Sea, Inland Waters and Fisheries, that has also a mandate. And it's when the things becomes complicating, because we manage the area, we can't issue license for fishing activities. That's done by the Ministry of Sea, Inland Waters and Fisheries. So one minister issues license, the other manages the area. We try to fix that. We've signed several MOUs with different departments within the Ministry of Sea, Inland Waters and Fisheries to try and regulate the access and the management of this area. But we also have the Maritime National Institute. So marine-based activities such as diving, snorkel, recreational fishing are licensed by the Maritime Institute, National Institute. Again, we have signed MOUs and we work very close, but it's not an ideal situation because even users of the area struggle to use the area to go through different departments. So industrial and semi-industrial fishing, as I said, they're not allowed. I'm not gonna go and speak a lot of them, besides the fact that the big issues around those type of fisheries is do with law enforcement, basically. It's quite often, even next week, and processes are going to court now. We found 4 semi-industrial line fishing boats fishing within our boundaries. Same happened before with industrial. And 2 weeks ago, we found a semi-industrial prawn fishing boat also inside our boundaries. So to those fisheries, our focus is more on the law enforcement because they're not allowed. The ones that are allowed are the artisanal, subsistence, and recreation and sport fishing. Artisanal in Mozambique is with deck in and inner motors, or without deck and inner motors. So the first ones are not allowed, and the second one is allowed in the reserve. The main difference is the capacity to stay out in the sea, and the amount, obviously, the capacity to fish. Subsistence is allowed, and recreation and sport fishing is also allowed in the reserve. So on artisanal and subsistence fishing, what we know, it's open access. They can go and fish pretty much where they can reach. The mesh size is regulated. They do to a license. The subsistence, you don't need a license. And also it's classified based on a rate propulsion. So your engine has to be below X amount of kVAs. And there is no national management for these type of fisheries. What are the challenges that we face? Poor control of fishing effort, because they move around. They come from different places in mainland. The catch per unit of effort is decreasing. As Motseki said, and in fact he's probably the expert here, no compliance with mesh size. Overfishing of juveniles and larval stages. That is well known, and it's a concern for us. Lack of research on selectivity on minimum mesh size. You know, the mesh size established without really going through a lot of research on selectivity. And lack of research on biology growth. So we don't know very well when they matured or not. Intertidal invertebrates are poorly mentioned nationwide and large undocumented. So although we have in Mozambique a fisheries institute, there's not been a lot of investment in trying to understand the collection of intertidal invertebrates. On our side, our management plan that is under revision didn't focus a lot on these type of fisheries. So there are specific measures that need to be included that weren't there, and we expect to have a much better management plan now. And also the co-management with the communities needs to improve. We knew that, we learned that. CCP means Fisheries Community Council. That is I'll call it an institution that is created by the Minister of the Sea, Inland Waters and Fisheries, is made by local fishermen to manage the resource better. So we have in the reserve, I would say, 2 components. One is the, let's call it the Indian Ocean, that it's mainly for tourism, is mainly used by tourists, with the exception of some fishermen at Inyaka Island. Most of the local fishermen don't use the ocean much, finding fishing from the shore. And then we have the bay side where it says there, but yes. Sorry, I heard someone. And we have the Maputo Bay side. That's where most of our artisanal and subsistence fisheries are and work on. So we started to do a socioeconomic study on the bay side, on the communities around the bay side, to understand their livelihoods, their concerns, their challenges, and their problems. At the same time, we worked on establishing 2 CCPs in the different regions, separating different regions on the Mashangulu Peninsula, to work with them in protecting their resource. After that, we started to design a fishing management plan for that same area, the Maputo Bay, that mainly, widely consulted, widely discussed. But what we found is that there's a lot that we don't know in this area in terms of fisheries. There's no data, there wasn't enough data. So mainly these plan takers and indicators for the need of research, investigate, to bring new rules, if the case, into the area. So one of the things that the management plan, fishing management plan for this area brings was the necessity, and this was in coordination with the Minister of Fisheries, to protect some areas, nursery areas. And the map there shows the brown dots on the bottom. That's an area indicated by the community to be fully protected. So we are now managing this area together with the community. It's not allowed to fish there. So we're closing areas. We close areas like that. And we're aware that there's a huge pressure on coastal resources. So we the communities decide to embarking on what we call community projects. I really don't like much the name. We started, as I said, to have a community conservation area, jointly managed with a reserve. And we also identified with them some alternative livelihoods that go from there's lakes on that peninsula. We're doing tilapia now in the pilot stages. It's going quite well. People in the area weren't familiar with the process. First, there were a lot of doubts around, but slowly they're joining. We have now 15 families farming tilapia. We start recently also mussels mariculture pilot. It's going also very well. One of the things when we did the socioeconomic study that we found that was the major concern for our communities was they didn't have access to ice or cold facilities. So they were kind of forced to sell very cheap the catches because it would be rotten. So together and an investment of the Minister of Fisheries within the fishing plan that we designed, there's an ice plant that has been placed in the area, and we started also to a process of subsidized cold stores, individual cold stores for the fishermen. A fisherman and his family doesn't have to die as a fisherman, and such we also started training in life skills, especially the young people in the area, such as plumbing, cooking, cutting, and sewing. With some good results, people are open their own business. Some young people open. We've trained so far at around 50 young people. We also investing a lot on schools, on environmental awareness, with being the message, lot focus on fishing and sustainable fishing, as Moteki refer, issues like pollution, overfishing, and etc. has been discussed with our children, and they are involved in a lot of beach cleanups and a lot of activities in the area. We're also promoting conservation agriculture and supplying water for human consumption and irrigation. That applies both for artisanal and subsistence fishing. On recreation and sport fishing, that is it's a tourism industry almost. It's again, it's open access. They can go anywhere. There's no restrictions. There is a license. There's a need for a license that is issued by the Minister of Fisheries. There is no national management plan. There is an existing regulation that is outdated and includes things like each individual on a boat can fish up to 10 fish per day. And it's quite complicated because a boat with 5 people can come out every day with 50 fish on board. Then the same regulation says that you're not allowed to sell it, but it's very, very difficult to control because the fish go home and then you can't track it. So we are aware, and we found in the past people that are illegally selling fishing, both in Mozambique and in South Africa, coming out of recreation and sport fishing. Challenge, poor control of fishing effort. Again, the catch per unit effort is decreasing. We need to review the bag limit. And also there's a lot of litter associated with these recreational fishing. Line discarding, hooks, also plastics that are around the bait that we find often on a beach. What we've been doing or trying to do, it's a lot of research and monitoring, both on the ecosystem like coral reef, understand the coral reef health, because the coral reef will feed the system. And we also record daily the fish catching. The picture on the right is a report made based on that data. Actually, is a report produced by CTV. And as I said, I saw that Raquel joined us. We're looking to, on this new management plan, to redefine the bag limits and the fishing effort. We want to reduce dramatically the bag limit on this type of fisheries, and we want to promote catch and release and keep the existing no-go areas and adding some no-go areas that weren't in the previous management plan. One of the constraints that we have to manage better marine protected area that includes all the fisheries that I explained is training. There's no specific training to marine rangers. It's really difficult to get that going, both on anti-poaching, so they can operate and understand legislation better, and mainly operating. Access to technology, it's initial, so that will improve, and also knowing the fish, knowing what they're protecting, what they're controlling, knowing what is protected, what is not protected. Talking about TFCA, it becomes more complex because we need to find ways to do joint training. So we have SOPs. The objective of the TFCA is clear, but currently I'll say that we're not effective. And this is one of the reasons. Other is we can't cross the borders. And we are aware of boats and people crossing illegal on both sides to go fish, and it's really difficult to control. So that's pretty much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for a very interesting presentation. Miguel mentioned that he is not an expert, which I disagree. But having said that, I think we are all here in a deep learning to share information, to share knowledge and experiences, how we can do it better, and also cross-pollinate ideas across different parts of the world. So answers might not be lying with Miguel or with myself, they might be lying with you. So let's have a conversation. I would like to start our discussion by pointing to a very important thing that Miguel mentioned. It's worrying from my side. As we all know, open access fisheries has resulted in a lot of decimation of fish species. It allows for participation and harvest that is not regulated. And as we know, under these conditions, the amount of fishing is greater than the social optimal levels that are needed. Economic benefits and profits are normally dissipated, fish stocks are depleted, and can even be driven to extinction. So as SADC, as well as our partners, including WWF, FAO, etc., we have been advocating for adoption of better management and regulatory regimes. For instance, introduction of user rights. I'm not sure if Miguel, those are in the pipeline, you are having a discussion. You might not be the relevant people, maybe me might be the relevant people to introduce such a discussion. But we've been trying to put it through a principle that the right to fish carries with it the obligation to do so in a responsible manner. So having said that, it is important that we help our countries to start, promoting better management practices and adopting better regulatory regimes. We've had a conversation around this on different options that are available in introducing a user right regime, especially now that we are promoting ecosystems approach to fisheries management. A question for me, Miguel, is you did mention that there are fishing activities happening. What I wanted to know is basically how many individuals are involved from different communities with fishing activities, but also which target species are of interest to these communities.
Thank you. I'm assuming you're referring to the local communities because the artisanal fishing, the recreational fishing is difficult. They come and they go. Although we monitor them, we register that, it's difficult to tell you how many. On the peninsula, on the bay side, excluding the island, Inyaka Island is something that we still have to, there are some institutional issues that we have to resolve, and we're not being present there. So on the peninsula, we're talking about 406 fishermen from the different communities. Targets, it's a lot of species, so I'm not gonna go there, but I'll say, prawns, crabs, it's a mangrove area. So there's a lot of crabs that we don't know, actually. We're trying to understand now the quantities that are coming out of those mangroves. That's not a control. Also like eels, croakers, sea breams, imperers are the main groups that are coming out of those waters. Let me say exactly that we started 2-3 years ago for the first time start to monitor the catches on that side of the reserve. We started, maybe it's important to refer to that we started the marine reserve with one ranger. And for several years, we had 3 rangers. So we had to focus on certain areas. So very recently, in the last 5-6 years, we moved the team grew and we moved into the bayside. So we applied for funds because we want to understand better, and we are in that stage to understand the dynamics in the area. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you, Miguel. A quick follow-up is there's always been a question in the region as to, in protected areas, who should take charge of compliance, monitoring, and control? Who's supposed to inspect? Is it the Conservation Authority or the Fisheries Authority? How can we make it work? I know there is a South African example where an agreement was that fisheries will do MCS on MPAs as well as licensing, but it should be based on an agreement on the amount of fish to be taken out of such an area.
It's quite complicated. I think South Africa is moving to a good solution. I would say that it should be the conservation to manage it and to decide based also on policies that come out from the Ministry of Fisheries. I would say that we should implement it, should enforce, and we should allow the fisheries to come and, I don't know the right word in English, like to check us if we're doing the right thing based on the policies that come out from the Ministry of Fisheries. But we should be allowed by the fisheries to issue license, to enforce, and they will come and check if we are, I'll give an example like the recreational fishing, the bag limit nationwide is 10. We should be allowed to go to 3, not to 11 or 13, but we should, as conservation, say, no, in this area, bag limit is 3. Okay, that's the kind of things that that needs to happen, that we need to look to the country policies related to fisheries and accommodate to the reality of conservation areas, and then be probably supervised by the fisheries department.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask Clara to summarize questions because we have several questions from the chat room addressed to Miguel. So I'm going to ask Clara.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Yeah, there is a couple of questions that have come through from the audience. Thank you. I think there was a question from Steve Collins. They're all revolved mostly around the community offtake. So I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, to unmute the people that have asked the questions that pertain to the community offtake and give them a chance to speak. And then Miguel can answer those. So Steve, can you unmute yourself, please, and ask your question? After that is Dita, and after that is Esheverino Shinotezvi from Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Miguel, nice to see those pictures of my MSR. I missed that place. I just wanted to know about the monitoring of the community offtake. How is that done? I mean, you mentioned the issue of the shortage of rangers initially. So it's a question about who is doing the actual monitoring and the capturing of that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. After, can we please have Dita? You also had a question on community on the other side of that, which is the incomes. So Dita, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thanks, Clara, and thanks, Miguel. Well, my question refers to the community project. So, of course, it's very difficult to find alternative income possibilities, especially in rural areas. So that's not an easy one. And their attractiveness depends on the benefits that they give to the families. So I wonder, do you already know the impact of these alternative income opportunities on the fishing habitudes, on the behavior of these families? Thank you.
Thank you, Dieter. And then finally, and on a similar trend, a question from Esheverino Shinotezvi. Esheverino, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question to Miguel? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm Xaverino from Zimbabwe. I've got a pertinent question on you mentioned that both artisanal and recreational fishing operate under the open access property regime. And now my question is, how do you then promote sustainability under such property ownership regime? You mentioned a lot of challenges that you are facing in implementing some of the policies and initiatives that you are planning to do. But I think all those challenges are emanating from that open access property regime. So my question is, how are you going to promote sustainability through such property ownership regime of open access? Thank you.
Thank you, Xaverino. Miguel, floor is yours.
Steve, not just on the marine side, but also at MSR, what you did, and I hope this was your question. Remember, I'm a Portuguese speaker person. We've trained local monitors. You know, we don't have enough power, and the rangers monitor the monitors. So what we did together with CTV, we've trained local monitors to monitor the offtakes. I hope I answered your question, Steve. Are you there, Steve?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Perfect. Thanks very much. Are those monitors paid, or how are they? Are they part of the fishing association?
How they are paid?
Are they?
Yeah. They are paid for it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Dieter, you know, I think it's very early still to speak on changes on behavior. Although we can say that we're very pleased that more often we've been getting the local communities reporting on illegal activities, and what we've been doing, depending on the offender, some of the issues, the offences are resolved within the Fisheries Council, the local Fishery Council, and if it's the case of boats coming outside the communities, then the reserve takes the lead on solving the problems. So the idea is that we don't want to just be the police there. So there's an education process on it also. So if it's a local person, we together with the council. So probably they start a change on it, but it's still very early days to say clearly that this is definitely a long process. Dieter, did I answer your question?
Yes, thanks, Miguel. And I think that's fair enough, because the impact is not, of course, only to fisheries, but it can be trust building and other effects that, like you mentioned it, sort of that they indicate illegal practices and such things. So this could also be impacts of such trust building activities, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, it is, and that's why I mentioned conservation agriculture. You know, we've been addressing a lot of different activities, and agricultural conservation has to do with slash and burn in the area. So there is, you know, different activities trying to change perception, and it's not just perception. What we found is that when we first met with the fishing community there, some of them, they say, no, we're aware of the problems, but we do some illegal things because we have to feed our family. So there's a lot of initiatives going. It's not that the fishermen don't know what they're doing, but you know, there's other things, and I didn't mention here, but some of these communities, Cholomban and Mabuluku, that are mainly of fishermen, are part of an initiative that Steve knows very well, that is the Anvil Bay Lodge, that is a partnership between the community and the private sector. So that's what's been happening. You know, while you do conservation awareness, you need to provide sustainability and food on the table for the communities to start talking about changing mindsets.
Thanks, Miguel.
Reno, I wish I knew to answer your question, honestly. Maybe Moteki knows better than I do that one. It's really, really difficult to control. You know, we on the bay side have a very short boundary. We have only 1 nautical mile. And a lot of fishing activity happens there. And this mobility and open access, we can see it, we can feel it. But honestly, I don't know if Moteki can help me on that one, because he's definitely the expert here. I wish I knew the answer.
Thanks, Miguel. I can't spell your name, Exeverino.
Yep.
Yes. And I'm glad you're from Zimbabwe, because we've been having discussions around open access in inland fisheries, starting with Lake Kariba, Lake Malawi, Nyasa. And this has been a serious problem. And like you said, and if you remember when I started the discussion, I mentioned especially the issue of open access. And from SADC point of view, we've been promoting user rights approaches, which will help solve the problems that are currently being experienced with overcapacity that you can't even control. But the fundamental challenge is that Dita even did mention, and I saw in the chat, Dawanda did mention, what sort of alternative livelihood opportunities you are going to provide when you introduce a regime that is going to limit access. So these are policy issues and areas that I think a well-advised research and a scientific approach, which is also precautionary, can be adopted to ensure that you don't leave people out. There are traditional fishermen who are linked to specific areas. How do we ensure that they don't lose out on such a livelihood opportunity that they've been living on? But also more important is communities that have been living along the coast for a longer period of time. They probably don't have other alternatives than fishing itself. So it requires us to have a broader multi-stakeholder approach that will involve, like Miguel mentioned, issues of conservation agriculture and opportunities that might be provided by other sectors. Tourism being one of those. How do you create opportunities around those to relieve pressure from fisheries when you introduce such a controlled regime? But it's a conversation that we should continue having. Answers are there. It's a matter of us being sensitive to the existing situations. Miguel, you want to add something?
No, Moteki, I think you covered well. In Mozambique, we've been discussing also access rights. But I think one has to be careful, because the access rights will exclude people. And again, yep. I think you mentioned it all. We don't want to exclude. You know, poverty is a reality. Fisheries are declining. So we need to be very, very, and usually on these and this discussion, we need to understand we're taking out of this discussion the semi-industrial fishing. They have a much bigger impact than the artisanal fishing. So it's a combination of all those things that needs to be thought very well.
Sorry, Miguel and Moteki, there is a question here that ties in with the last point that Miguel has made, you know, in terms of remembering that artisanal fishing is not really the biggest of the problem when you have other semi-commercial and mid-commercial. There is a question from Clive Poltney, and he was asking how successful have your community projects such as aquaculture been in taking the pressure off of the natural fish resources. So have they moved from going into the sea to sort of focusing more on aquaculture? And similarly, if this is part of a community engagement plan. So Etsin Gandiva was asking, if you have a community engagement plan that leads your ability to interact with communities and find together a solution to go forward, and how successful has the effort been in improving the fish resources? So like both of them assume the communities are the underlying, you know, the artisanal fishing and livelihood fishing is the main problem, which may not necessarily be or entirely be. But they were asking if there has been some pressure taken off through community engagement or aquaculture. Thank you.
You know, it's definitely not the only problem, and probably is the less problematic, the artisanal fishing. But what we know is that the majority of our people living on the coast in Mozambique, so the coastal resources are heavily overexploited, and that's why the fisheries department has been promoting high sea fishing instead. But to answer your question, Clive, it's very early days. This started 2 years ago. You know, people weren't aware, they didn't know. So it's very piloting. And there's also that some of these projects are very focused on women for various reasons that you all know. And in the specific case of this area where we're working, there's a group of women that use mosquito nets to catch prawns right at the edge of the beach. You know, very tiny prawns, and with the prawns come all the rest, because they don't have other alternatives. So we're trying to remove these women from a very invasive practice to something that can improve the income and generate a better income. But it's very early stages. You know, we have to make it a much bigger quantities, have much higher, much bigger numbers of cages to produce tilapia, of long lines of mussels to start creating that change, I think. Clive, did I answer your question? Clive, are you there?
Clive? Carry on, Miguel. There was another question from Edson.
Can you remind me the other question?
Yeah, sure. Edson was asking, it was first of all complimenting on the case study, and then saying that he was asking if you have any community engagement plan, and how successful has the community engagement efforts been in improving fish resources?
Yeah, we do, and that's why we help to establish what we call the Community Fishing Council. You know, we've created the conditions, we built a room, a meeting room, so we can speak, discuss the manage of these resources. You know, as we said to them, it's not our resources, it's their resources. So the management of it has to come from them, and we will be there to help and support.
Thank you, Miguel. I hope you managed to answer that. Clara, we needed more time for this deep learning. I hope you'll give us another chance, maybe after the webinar series, to explore some of the key issues. I think there's a lot of interest coming in this direction, especially with the work that Miguel and colleagues are doing in the marine park there in Lubombo, but also for us as the fisheries and aquaculture people in the region, because we think it's a good opportunity to also pilot some of the user right approaches in the marine park, to also influence the policies in Mozambique in general. because I know there have been discussions on addressing the challenges with open access fishing, but it is important for us to show them the benefits. So we would like to appeal to our partners to make some resources available for us to do work with Miguel to pilot some of the best management practices available. One more issue that I wanted to raise is maybe we also need to look at the scorecard with regard to ecosystems approach to fisheries to ensure that at least all the principles are addressed and we are able to identify where are the gaps, so that when we design fisheries management programs as well as a surveillance regime in the marine park, it responds to all the principles as described by ecosystems approach to fisheries. Without wasting time, Clara, this was a good deep learning, a first time for me. And we thank you for considering us to have a conversation with everybody here. I promise that in the future, we'll have more fisheries people to provide perhaps more answers to some of the challenges that are experienced in Mozambique. Over to you, Clara.
Thank you very much, Moteki, and thank you, Miguel, for your time, for your knowledge and insights, and for talking to us about an experience which is a very important one for the region. And I also appreciate the points that you both made, especially Moteki, on the fact that the lessons that we learn from coastal fisheries can also be applied to inland fisheries. So wherever we have similar conditions of a combination of livelihood and sort of sustenance, sort of income generating on a larger scale, and tourism within a framework of conservation, the same lessons can apply and can be learned. So we will take to the steering committee of the SADC TFCA network the idea of talking more about fisheries going forward, and really make the point that transfrontier conservation areas should also be more engaged on resolving some of these specific issues that pertain to a pocket of ecosystems that are part of the larger TFCA. So thank you, everybody. Thank you both. Thank you for the participants today. Thank you for the engagement. Michael, there is a question that you asked, which we're not going to have the time to deal, but I'm sure that you can ask it again or in the other sessions. We will talk more about water resources. We'll talk more about trying to bridge development and conservation issues in Southern Africa, which is really a very important strategic plan going forward. Without much further ado, I would like to close the session and remind everybody that we meet again on Tuesday next week for our presentations, and then on Thursdays again for the deep learning. You can find all the events on the SADC TFCA portal in the calendar, and some of you who have registered on the mail list and newsletter will receive it weekly online as well. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you again on Tuesday next week. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, by the way, you can also now release the video, release the microphone, and wave goodbye to each other and thank the presenter and the facilitator before you go. So thank you again, Miguel and Moteki. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao. Obrigado.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao, Miguel. Obrigado.
Thank you, Moteki. Well done.
Thank you.
Moteki. Excellent
Dita.
presentation.
Thank you, Dita. How are you?
Very good. How is it?
Great. I see Tawanda there as well.
Yeah,
Good.
Bye
Yeah,
bye.
thanks.
Good to see you, Zita. Oh,
See you.
bye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gandiwa, bye-bye.
We had Gandiwa and Gandiwa today, both of them in one session.
Yes, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Lisa.
Bye. I'm going to close the session now. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you again.